And he say, I'm not trying to dispute you anything, son. He said, but I was up preaching one Sunday at my podium. And I opened up my scripture and began to read. And all of a sudden, he said, I began to speak in tongues. And the Spirit of God gave me utterance. I heard the answer man. You know, he comes on 1100 different stations, and people call him about questions, whatever. One man called him and said that, you know, the church that he goes to, they advocate speaking in tongues. And they say you're not saved unless you speak in tongues. So this brother, in his attempt to answer that question, started talking about Paul and speaking in tongues. And he began to say Paul was very fluent in many languages. So he spoke Dutch and Hebrew and just different languages. Paul was very eloquent in his speech and being able to master different languages. And that's the way he explained it. And then he put down this notion about a supernatural experience with you speaking in tongues. Why don't we open the scripture and discuss what Paul was discussing? Right. Paul didn't talk about speaking in somebody else's dialect or language. When he talked about speaking in tongues, he was specifically talking about speaking in tongues. Yes. And he also said that I speak in tongues more than any of you. Yes, sir. He said, but let's bring some intelligence to this thing. Right. He said, now I'd rather for you to prophesy, because when somebody might come in your midst and all of you are speaking in tongues, nobody know what you're saying. Amen. And they'll call you mad. They will say you're barbarian, you've lost your mind. So in order to keep that down, and they don't talk about you like that, he said, now, 2 or 3 of you all, if you have a word of edification, a word of comfort, a word of knowledge, I'd rather for it be done by the course of no more than 3 people, 2 or 3 people. Amen. He wasn't telling nothing about them speaking in tongues and all that, because even in Paul's teaching, he taught that there's a gift of tongues. There's a gift. Amen. That you didn't even learn. That's right. No, sir. The marvel of the day of Pentecost is that they were speaking in tongues, because the Bible said they began to speak in tongues. It didn't say nothing about them speaking in other languages. They spake in tongues. The marvel of it was that the people around began to understand what they were saying in the tongues that they were speaking in, that this was the work of God. Amen. That was the marvel of the hour, that they were speaking in tongues, and the people from every nation and every tongue and every nationality began to understand what they were saying. Didn't change any of that. Didn't change the phenomenon, the experience, the supernatural giving of the Holy Ghost and speaking in tongues. Amen. Amen. Because you can't take that from me, brother. No. You can't take that from me. I didn't practice upon it. No, but like I said, I didn't work my mind real fast. No. You know, going no fit, and all of a sudden I started saying, none of that happened to me. I was just seeking and praising God. And I had asked God for it. Because if it happened to them, like the Bible records it happened, I wanted it to happen to me. Amen. That same way. Because we got so many different ideas about the Holy Ghost. Yes. I knew that if he gave it to me like he gave it to them, I don't care what nobody said, I was secure. I was secure in my experience with God, because I asked him for it like they got it. Since he's no respecter of person, since he did it for them, here I am in line. I want you to do it to me. Do it for me. You hear me, Daddy Joe? Ask for it. He'll give it to you. You're not all right without it. You got to have it. Amen. You're not all right without it. You got to have it. Amen.